You can still follow it in thought, tracing its journey back to the moment of discovery and forward into the endless dark. This is the way memory works, fading in substance, enduring in impression. You do not hold every detail, but you hold the feeling of what was. You do not remember every number, but you remember the awe, and awe, once planted, does not fade. You let yourself rest in this rhythm of fading and persisting. It feels like breathing. Inhale, hold, release. Memory, too, inhales what is noticed, holds it for a time, then lets it scatter. The fragments do not vanish. They become part of the wider field of thought, available when light touches them again. For astronomers, the memory of 3i Atlas lives in data archives. Tables of numbers, images stored on servers, orbital calculations preserved in digital ink. For you, its memory lives more softly in the whisper of wonder, in the awareness that a fragment of another star system once passed close enough to see. Both kinds of memory are fragile. Files may fade, human awe may dim, but together they ensure the visitor is not forgotten. You realize that memory itself is an act of preservation against disappearance, just as a comet's dust tail makes visible what would otherwise be invisible. Memory illuminates what would otherwise slip away. It is not permanence, but it is enough. The fragility of memory is not weakness. It is a kind of beauty, because in fragility you find tenderness. You hold gently what cannot be grasped tightly. You honor it by knowing it may fade, and yet choosing to notice it now. So it is with 3i Atlas. You know its fragments are gone, its body dissolved, but you choose to carry its image, even if only as a whisper. You choose to follow its fragile tale of memory, letting it guide you deeper into the awareness of the cosmos. You breathe slowly as you picture this tale, stretched across the night sky, not bright like a comet's plume, but subtle, faint, more felt than seen. It curves behind the visitor, a signature written across the silence. And you understand, every trace matters, no matter how faint. Some visitors vanish into archives, stored but forgotten, unseen until someone returns to look. Others live on in stories, spoken and retold, glowing brighter in imagination than they ever did in reality. 3i Atlas lives in both. It exists in the precise orbit charts and in the quiet awe of those who noticed it. It is fading, but it is eternal. This paradox comforts you, because memory does not need to be whole to be meaningful. Even a fragment, even a faint streak, is enough to remind you of what passed. Even the most delicate traces can endure if carried. With care, you think of how your own life mirrors this. Your memories, too, are fragile tales of light. Moments scatter, fade, dissolve into distance. Yet some persist, glowing in the quiet space of reflection. You cannot hold them all, but you can honor the ones that remain. In this way, 3i Atlas becomes part of you, not because you touched it, but because you remember it. Its fragile trail now extends through your awareness, binding your life to its passage. You let that awareness calm you, like dust settling on still water. The visitor is gone, but the memory endures. And in that endurance, you find peace. Gravity is the soft hand that holds the cosmos together. It is steady, unrelenting, always pulling. You do not see it, but you feel its presence everywhere. In the arc of planets, in the steady fall of rain, in the curve of the moon's path across the night. It is the law that keeps the universe from unraveling. Every planet, every comet, Every fragment of dust responds to it. They bend their paths, they circle, they submit. Even the most chaotic wanderers, the asteroids, the icy comets, the clouds of drifting debris, all remain tethered by its invisible thread. Gravity is patient, and in its patience, it wins every time. But sometimes, you witness a quiet rebellion. A body enters the reach of the sun, feels the tug of its vast gravity, and then slips away. It bends, yes, but it does not stay. It curves. Just enough to mark its presence, then continues outward, never to return. This is the gentle betrayal of gravity, not a breaking of law, but a reminder of its limits. 3. IATLAS was such a rebel. Its speed was too great, its momentum too vast, for the sun to capture. Gravity reached for it, pulled at it, tried to weave it into the solar pattern. And yet, the visitor resisted. It acknowledged the tug, bent slightly, and then continued. Outward, unbound. You pause on this thought. Gravity, which holds entire planets in orbit for billions of years, could not hold this single fragment. The strength that binds moons to giants, stars to galaxies, was not enough to capture one fragile body of ice and dust. This is not weakness, but inevitability. Because gravity's reach is infinite, but its grip is not absolute. Speed can overcome it. Momentum can carry a body through, unsachor. ed.u soften into this paradox, that the same law which binds also allows escape. It is like the tide pulling at the shore. Most grains of sand remain, but a few are lifted, carried outward, drifting into wider seas. So too with stars. Most fragments circle faithfully, but some are flung away, freed into the spaces between. The universe, you realize, is a loom. Gravity is the weaver's hand, drawing threads into patterns, creating symmetry and rhythm. Planets are beads strung along curved lines. Comets are strands of glitter woven back and forth. And yet, every loom has its stray threads. Every pattern has its loose ends. 3.1 ATLAS was one of those loose ends, a reminder that no pattern is perfect, that even law allows for freedom. You breathe slowly as you imagine this weaving. The Milky Way itself is a tapestry, a great spiral of light bound by gravity's hand. But even here, some stars wander the outskirts, pulled loose by encounters, drifting into intergalactic night. The same law that holds together also releases. The same pull that creates belonging also allows departure. And in that balance, you find beauty. Because without escape, there would be no exchange between stars. Without release, there would be no interstellar travelers, no messengers like 3.I ATLAS. It is precisely because gravity can be betrayed that your solar system receives whispers from other places. You rest in this thought. Betrayal is not always destruction. Sometimes it is gift. Sometimes the refusal to be bound carries new connections, new possibilities. 3.1 Atlas was not captured, but in its passing it gave you knowledge, wonder, and a fleeting glimpse of a greater whole. Gravity bent its path, but only slightly. Astronomers traced the curve, measuring its angle, confirming its freedom. The numbers revealed what the eyes alone could not. This was not a loop, but a line. This was not a return, but a farewell. The sun had tried to embrace it, but it slipped. Away like water through open fingers. You let yourself drift into that image. There is tenderness in the attempt, and there is grace in the release. The sun does not chase what escapes. It pulls, it bends, and then it lets go. This letting go is not loss, but part of the rhythm of the cosmos. You see this rhythm mirrored. In your own life, there are things you hold, and there are things you release. Not everything that enters your orbit remains. Some pass through briefly, touching you and then moving on. And though they do not stay, their presence still leaves a mark. You are changed by the encounter, even in their absence. So too with the solar system. 3-1 ATLA has passed through, unbound, yet not without effect. Its fragments mingled with solar dust. Its presence shifted awareness. Its story became part of your memory, part of your sky. You breathe deeply, letting the calm weight of this realization settle in you. Gravity's gentle betrayal is not a failure. It is an opening. It is the reason you can know that other systems exist, that their dust can brush against your own. It is the reason you can hold grains of alien memory in your imagination. The betrayal is gentle because gravity still leaves its trace. The visitor's path was bent, if only slightly. That bend tells you it was here. That curve is the fingerprint of encounter, the evidence of touch. Even in escape, there is connection. You linger in this awareness, letting it soothe you. The universe is not rigid, not absolute. It allows freedom as well as binding. It allows passing as well as holding. It allows whispers to slip through, carrying with them the promise of more. Silence is not emptiness. It is texture, it is presence. It is the soft fabric that cradles all sound. In silence, you notice the subtler rhythms, the faint hum of your own body, the steady rise and fall of your breath, the quiet thought that passes through the mind. And in space, silence is the natural state, the background against which all other things must appear. When you listen to an interstellar visitor, you do not hear it in the way you hear rain or wind. There are no footsteps across the void, no echoes traveling through air. What you receive instead is silence, the absence of signals, the absence of noise. This silence is not blank, but filled with meaning. It tells you what the visitor is not, just as clearly as if it were speaking. Aloud, aloud. Silence is not emptiness, it is fullness unspoken. And in that fullness, you find rest. Light has its own language. It speaks in flickers, in shifts of brightness, in patterns that ripple across the silence of space. Every star, every planet, every fragment of stone carries a story told not by words, but by the way light reflects, glows, or fades. When astronomers turned their instruments toward 3I Atlas, they were not listening for sound. They were listening for light. And in that listening, they heard something uneven, something restless. The brightness changed. At times it swelled, as though the visitor glimmered with sudden clarity. At other times it dimmed, as though withdrawing into shadow. Fragments seemed to scatter, dust trailing outward like threads unraveling from fabric. The story was not simple. You let your thoughts drift into this rhythm of brightness and dimness. It feels like breathing. Inhale, exhale, glow, fade. Light becomes a heartbeat across the cosmos, pulsing not with intention, but with the fragile physics of material under strain. Some said it was breaking apart, its icy body, stressed by the pull of the sun and the heat of its rays, fractured into smaller pieces. Each fragment reflected differently, scattering brightness like shattered glass catching sunlight at different angles. Others wondered if what seemed like breaking was instead revealing. Perhaps hidden layers, once locked away in deep cold, were now exposed to warmth, releasing gases, scattering dust, showing secrets that had been buried for millions of years. You pause on this difference, breaking or revealing. Both carry endings, but one carries beginnings too. To break is to lose form. To reveal is to uncover form that was always there, waiting. Perhaps the light of 3i Atlas was telling both stories at once. Your breath slows as you picture dust drifting into the solar wind. Tiny grains, once bound tightly within a larger body, now freed to scatter outward. Each grain continues a journey of its own, pushed by sunlight, carried like pollen into the dark. They are small, almost invisible, yet each one carries chemistry from another star's domain. In this way, even breaking is not disappearance. It is transformation. The visitor does not end, it disperses. Its matter remains, redistributed into new paths, new stories. You soften into this thought. Light never truly fades, even when an object dissolves, even when fragments scatter, the traces continue. Photons race outward, carrying the signature of what once was. Some of those photons reach your telescopes, your eyes, your awareness. They carry with them the whisper of the object's existence, the memory of its form. This is how you know it was there. Not because you touched it, not because you captured it, but because its light crossed the gulf of space and found you. In this way, the cosmos is a great web of illumination, each point shining, scattering, reflecting, telling its quiet story to whoever will notice. You imagine the instruments tracing those changes in brightness. Numbers shift, graphs rise and fall. But beneath the data is something deeply human, the awareness of being connected to another place. Each flicker is a message, though not in words. Each burst of light is like a hand raised across the void, reminding you that something distant and strange has brushed close, enough to be seen, and you realize that wonder itself often arrives in flickers. You do not hold it constantly. It comes in sudden bursts of awareness, then recedes, then returns again. The light of the visitor mirrors this rhythm. Brightness, dimness, sudden flare, like moments of understanding, glimpses of awe, some mysteries, announce themselves loudly, but others remain gentle, partial, unresolved. 31ATLAS was such a mystery. Its light refused to settle into one clear pattern. It left astronomers with curves and dips that could be interpreted in more than one way. Was it breaking? Was it revealing? Or was it simply behaving in a manner you had not yet imagined? You breathe into that uncertainty, letting it soothe you rather than unsettle you. Because life, like light, is not always steady. It flickers, it grows, it fades, it flares unexpectedly. And in those fluctuations, beauty resides. The fragments of 3i Atlas are gone now, carried outward into invisibility, but their light remains. In memory, recorded, archived, studied. Even the act of noticing has preserved them. And so the visitor refuses to fade completely. It lingers in awareness, like an afterimage you still see when you close your eyes. You let yourself drift with that afterimage. It is soft, fleeting, but insistent. It reminds you that nothing ever disappears fully. Everything leaves traces, echoes, shadows of light. Even silence is illuminated by memory. Perhaps this is the story light was trying to tell you, that endings are never absolute, that scattering is also continuation, that fading is also transformation, that what seems to vanish has simply shifted into a form beyond your current reach. Your body relaxes as you hold this thought, as though your own life mirrors the same truth. Moments may fade, memories may scatter, but none are erased. They remain in some form, lingering in echoes, in impressions, in traces of light left behind. So it is with 3IATLAS. It may have fragmented, dimmed, and vanished from view, but it refuses to fade completely. Its light remains, not only in data, but in the wonder it stirred, and that wonder continues to move within you, like a fragment of another star carried into your own dreaming. Secrecy has a weight all its own. It does not feel like emptiness, but like a presence pressing inward, invisible yet unmistakable. You sense it in the pause after a question is asked. You sense it in the careful choice of words, in the way a voice lowers when it approaches something delicate. When discoveries slip into silence, you feel that weight. It is not the silence of ignorance, but the silence of knowledge withheld. And in that withholding, you are reminded that truth can be fragile, vulnerable to being distorted if shared too quickly or too broadly. The story of 3I Atlas is wrapped in such weight. A visitor from beyond was seen, measured, and confirmed. But after the first flickers of reporting, the attention dimmed, the voices quieted, and the event retreated into the background of public awareness. It was not erased, but it was softened into near invisibility. You let your thoughts drift on why. Why would something so rare, so extraordinary, be allowed to fade so quickly from view? The answers are not simple. They are woven from threads of caution, fear, and the delicate nature of knowledge itself. Part of the weight comes from science itself. Astronomers know that early findings can shift. Numbers can change as data improves. Conclusions that seem strong one day may dissolve the next. To speak too loudly too soon risks misleading, risks fueling speculation that cannot later be undone. And so restraint becomes a form of care. But part of the weight comes from outside science. Politics and perception press upon discovery. The thought of objects from beyond the solar system stirs imagination in ways that are difficult to guide. It evokes questions of contact, of meaning, of vulnerability. To release such knowledge openly is to risk it being twisted, exaggerated, or misunderstood. And so silence becomes a shield against misinterpretation. You reflect on how secrecy weaves itself like a net. The net is meant to protect, but it also entangles. It keeps fragile truths from being broken, but it also keeps minds from exploring freely. It preserves clarity, but it can also smother wonder. Secrecy feels heavy because it is not neutral. It is an active choice, a decision to withhold. And that choice leaves echoes in those who notice the absence. You feel those echoes even now, wondering not only about what is known, but about what is being kept from you. This tension is not new. History is filled with moments where knowledge was quieted. The first whispers of heliocentrism, the first murmurs of evolution, the first detection of radiation from the cosmos. Each was met with hesitation, with caution, with silence, before acceptance. Not because they were untrue, but because their truths were heavy. You rest in this rhythm. Discovery, silence, eventual release. It is not always conspiracy, but it always carries weight. Because silence shapes perception as much as speech. You breathe slowly, noticing how secrecy mirrors your own life. There are thoughts you have not spoken aloud, not because they are false, but because they are tender. There are memories you keep folded inside, not because they lack meaning, but because they carry too much. In this way, secrecy is not only political or scientific, it is human. It is a way of holding what feels fragile. Perhaps that is how to view the silence around 3i, ATLAS. Not as denial, but as protection. Not as erasure, but as waiting. The knowledge is not gone. It is simply being carried carefully, like a flame shielded from the wind. Still, you feel the weight, because secrecy always invites questions. What else lies hidden? It was the quiet reminder that not all things are meant to be explained. That sometimes the act of noticing is itself the gift. You breathe into that thought, letting it calm you. So much of life urges you to define, to solve, to close the loop. But here, in the case of Oumuamua, the loop never closes. It remains open, an unfinished curve stretching outward into the unknown. And perhaps that openness is what makes it beautiful. You were not asked to solve it. You were only asked to wonder, to hold the possibility that the universe is richer, stranger, and more varied than the categories you build. 3i ATLAS reminded you of this once more. As it fragmented, as it dissolved into brightness and dust, it seemed to echo the earlier visitor, as if to say, the story is not complete, the questions are still alive, the mysteries are still unfolding. Two visitors, close in time, bound by secrecy. Not secrecy imposed by intent, but secrecy born of distance, fragility, and brevity. They arrived quickly, they vanished quickly, and they left only traces. Traces in numbers, in faint images, in the quiet awe they stirred. You rest in this rhythm of remembering. The past and present fold together. The memory of Oumuamua softens into the presence of 3i ATLAS, and together they form a pair of whispers. Whispers that tell you there are more. There have always been more, and you have only just begun to notice them. Memory is not only looking backward, it is also a guide forward. By recalling what has been seen, you prepare to recognize what may appear again. The memory of Oumuamua ensures that future visitors will not be overlooked. The sky has changed for you now, not in its stars, but in your awareness of what drifts among them. You let that awareness settle gently. It is like learning to hear a faint note in a song, one you had never noticed before. Once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. So too with interstellar guests. Once you know they exist, you cannot return to seeing the sky as closed. The silence of Oumuamua was unsettling, but it was also a gift. It was the silence that expanded your perception, that widened the borders of your imagination. It made room for more questions, more possibilities, more wonder. And as you drift deeper into this thought, you feel memory itself become a kind of lullaby. It circles, it returns, it echoes, always gentle, always incomplete. The memory of the first visitor folds into the presence of the second, and together they lead you into rest. Silence can feel heavier than sound. It carries a different weight, a presence of absence. In the vastness of space, silence is expected. There is no air, no echo, no voice. But on Earth, when silence follows discovery, you notice it. You wonder why the voices soften, why the words become cautious, why something bright in the sky dims in conversation more than in reality. When 3i Atlas was first recorded, the data was real, the measurements undeniable. Its orbit told the unmistakable truth. It was not from here. Yet, after the first flicker of reports, the noise around it grew faint. The visitor was noted, then set aside. The coverage dimmed, the attention shifted, and the sky closed again as though nothing had passed through. You pause on this hush, sensing its fragility. Silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes it is protection. Sometimes it is hesitation. Sometimes it is the careful folding of information into drawers not meant to be opened too quickly. NASA, like all institutions of science, walks a line between discovery and responsibility. Each word released must balance excitement with caution, wonder with accuracy, and when an object arrives from beyond, too brief to be studied fully, too fragile to yield clear answers, silence becomes a shield. You breathe slowly as you reflect on this. Science is not only about questions and answers, it is also about timing, about how truth is shared. A finding too quickly shouted can distort. A conclusion too early drawn can mislead. And so the voice is lower, the pace slows, the language softens into understatement. The fragile silence around 3IATLAS was not denial, but restraint. It was a reminder that knowledge itself must be tended like a flame, protected from gusts that would scatter it into confusion. The astronomers had seen it, yes, but to the public, it was allowed to slip into obscurity. Its presence marked only by those who had been listening closely. You let this thought settle, like dust on glass. The truth of space often exists in a rhythm of reveal and retreat. A discovery emerges, glimmers, then fades from common sight, even as the data remains. It is not deception, but the nature of knowledge in its early stages, too delicate to be shouted, too uncertain to be proclaimed. This fragility has its own kind of beauty. You realize that silence is not only absence, but space for reflection. When a mystery is hushed, it does not vanish. It lingers, it waits. It matures in the quiet until you are ready to ask more. You feel this as a rhythm, sound, then silence, discovery, then pause. The pause allows the weight of wonder to deepen. It gives you time to feel the scale of what has been noticed before rushing into answers. And yet, you sense something more beneath this quiet, because interstellar visitors carry with them not only scientific questions, but cultural weight. They remind you that the solar system is not closed. They suggest that material from other stars, other worlds, drifts near. And such suggestions stir imagination, sometimes too much, sometimes beyond what evidence can support. Silence, then, becomes a form of guidance, a way of keeping off from tipping into speculation, a way of reminding you that mystery need not be filled too quickly. You breathe into this recognition. It feels calming, almost like a lullaby of restraint. To hold back words is not always to hide truth. Sometimes it is to honor its complexity. Sometimes silence is the most respectful response to the enormity of what you do not yet understand. NASA's quiet handling of 3IATLAS reflects this. The data was real, the orbit undeniable, but the interpretation fragile. Rather than fan flames of speculation, the choice was to let the object fade quietly, to remain a whisper for those who cared to listen. In this way, the silence was not suppression, but care. Care for the boundary between fact and imagination. You let yourself soften into this care. It mirrors the way you sometimes hold thoughts within yourself, choosing not to speak them too quickly, letting them ripen in quiet before sharing. There is wisdom in such patience. There is beauty in allowing silence to carry meaning. Still, the hush leaves you curious, because silence is never perfect. Even as official voices soften, the wonder continues in private minds. Questions bloom in the gaps whispered between those who notice. The very act of quieting the story only deepens its echo. Perhaps that is part of the rhythm, too. Discovery is not only about what is shown, but about what is left unsaid. What you do not hear becomes as powerful as what you do. The hush itself becomes a message. You breathe again, slowly, letting the weight of that realization sink in. The fragile silence of NASA is like the silence of the sky itself, vast, deliberate, holding more than it reveals. And just as the night hides countless stars from your eyes, so too does the hush hide countless questions still waiting. The veil drawn across 3i Atlas is not a wall. It is thin, permeable, like gauze. If you press gently, you see the outline of what lies behind it. You know it is there, even if you cannot touch it. And in that knowing, you find rest, because rest does not come only from answers. It comes also from trust that mysteries can wait, that silence is part of discovery, that what is hidden is not erased but preserved for another time. You feel the parallel between your own life and this cosmic hush. How many times have you held back words, not because they were untrue, but because they were not ready? How many times has silence carried more meaning than speech? The universe, in its way, does the same. It reveals, it pauses, it waits, and so you rest within this pause. You realize that silence itself can be soothing. Not everything must be explained at once. Not everything must be shouted into the light. Sometimes the gentlest truths arrive quietly. Like a whisper you only notice when all else has grown still. The fragile silence of NASA is part of this rhythm. It reminds you that discovery is not spectacle but patience. It is not a sudden blaze, but a slow unfolding. The choice to hush the story of 3i Atlas does not erase it. It preserves it, keeps it tender, waits for the right moment to explore further. You close your eyes as you drift into this thought, feeling how silence itself becomes a companion. The visitor is gone, but its memory lingers. The reports have faded, but the truth remains in the orbit it traced, in the numbers it left behind, in the awareness that something from beyond passed through. Every observation is ink. Every silence is space left for future words. The manuscript is never closed, because the cosmos is never complete. You let your breath match this rhythm, steady, spacious, unhurried. Each inhale is a fragment of knowledge. Each exhale is a release into the unknown. Together they form the balance of discovery. Holding on, letting go, moving forward. The visitor, then, is not just an object. It is a teacher. It demonstrates the value of thresholds, the quiet wisdom of things that cannot be defined. To dwell between known and unknown is not a weakness. It is a strength, a reminder that certainty is not the only form of truth. Wonder is also truth. Mystery is also truth. Possibility is also truth. And so, you rest in this balance. The visitor drifts on. It will not pause for clarity. It will not wait for your categories to catch up. It simply moves, silently, along its unbound path. You too continue resting, not in final answers, but in the beauty of open questions. The universe does not hurry. Its mysteries do not demand resolution. They only invite you to listen, to look, to imagine. In that invitation, you find peace. Questions are the most enduring companions of thought. Answers arrive, linger for a time, and then shift with new discoveries. But questions, they persist. They follow you into silence, into sleep, into the spaces where the mind wanders unguarded. When 3IATLAS slips away into the outer dark, what remains most strongly is not certainty, but a question. It is a question shaped not by data points, not by orbital diagrams, but by the hush surrounding it. Why was its story so quiet? Why did its presence not ignite the world's imagination as much as it might have? Was it because its appearance was fleeting, fragile, difficult to see? Or was it because the world is often too busy to notice such subtle wonders? The question lingers, and in its lingering, it gathers weight. You know that science thrives on curiosity. Every telescope pointed upward is itself a question. Every equation, every calculation is a way of asking the cosmos to reveal a secret. But sometimes the answers that come back are incomplete, blurred, or tangled in uncertainty. And in those moments, a new kind of question forms, not about what is seen, but about what is not said. Why silence? Why hesitation? Why mystery hidden within mystery? You think of the way comets have always stirred humanity. For centuries, they were seen as omens, streaks of meaning painted across the sky. Later, they became puzzles of ice and dust, studied with instruments and calculations. Each generation brought new interpretations, new frameworks of understanding. But 3IATLAS seems different. It arrives not as a blazing herald, nor as a carefully explained object, but as a whisper, half swallowed by shadows. The question presses more deeply. Was it hidden deliberately, or simply overlooked? The line between those two possibilities is thin, fragile, like a thread stretching across a vast void. To overlook as human attention scattered, priorities shifting, eyes turned elsewhere. To hide is different. To hide is deliberate. And yet, from the perspective of the night sky, the result feels the same. Something passes unnoticed. Something slips quietly away, leaving only faint traces. You let the thought expand softly, like ripples spreading on still water. Perhaps it was not malice, not secrecy, but fragility. Perhaps its fragments made it too dim, its structure too unstable, its presence too fleeting to hold public imagination for long. Not all visitors stay long enough to be remembered. Some fade before the human eye can fully appreciate them. A missed moment is not the same as a hidden truth, and yet both leave you with absence. Still, the idea of deliberate silence carries its own weight. You remember how fragile knowledge can be when balanced against fear or misunderstanding. There are discoveries that unsettle, that raise questions humanity may not yet be ready to face. Could the quiet around 3I Atlas have been one of those moments? A decision to let the mystery fade rather than stir too much wonder. The question glows faintly, like an ember in the dark dot. In the rhythm of your breath, you feel the echo of that uncertainty. Inhale, the cosmos reveals. Exhale, the cosmos conceals. The balance between the two is delicate, almost meditative. Knowledge is never absolute. It is filtered through instruments, through minds, through choices of what to share and what to withhold. You begin to see that science is not only about discovery, but about communication. The silence around 3IATLAS is itself a kind of answer, though not one that satisfies. The cosmos often offers truths in fragments. Light arrives after traveling millions of years, thinned, altered, distorted by dust and distance. Signals drown in noise. Data arrives incomplete. In this way, silence is woven into the very fabric of exploration. Perhaps what you feel is not suppression, but the natural hush of the universe itself, a silence that no human voice imposed. Still, you wonder. Still the question burns, softly. Why do questions feel so heavy when answers are absent? Perhaps because they stretch the imagination. Perhaps because they leave the mind open, unanchored, searching for a place to rest. But there is a quiet beauty in carrying a question without rushing toward an answer. It slows you, softens you, teaches patience. Like a seed planted in soil, a question may rest in darkness for a long time before it sprouts. It does not need to be resolved immediately to hold value. You reflect on other mysteries that once lingered unresolved. The strange motions of planets that hinted at unseen worlds. The faint glow in the sky that later revealed itself as cosmic background radiation. The wobble of stars that whispered of hidden exoplanets. All of these began as unanswered questions. All of them carried doubt and uncertainty before unfolding into revelation. Perhaps 3i, ATLAS, is part of this same lineage, a question waiting for its moment to be answered in some future year, by some future observer. For now, it leaves you, with wonder shaped like a lantern that does not show the full path ahead, but casts a soft light just far enough for the next step. You hold it gently, not as a burden, but as a companion. The question does not weigh you down. It steadies you in the vastness. It reminds you that not knowing is part of the journey. As you rest, you realize that this is the rhythm of life itself. Every ending leaves a question. Every departure leaves a silence. You cannot escape uncertainty, but you can learn to dwell in it without fear. The cosmos does not rush. It does not demand clarity. It allows mysteries to stretch across centuries, waiting patiently until the right eyes and minds are ready. And so you, too, can wait. You close your eyes and feel the vastness expand within you. The visitor drifts further away, almost beyond recall. Its fragments dissolve into interstellar night. But the question it left behind remains luminous, like starlight, that has not yet faded. Why so quiet? Why so fleeting? Why so easily missed? You may never know, but the wondering itself becomes a kind of answer. To live with wonder is to live in harmony with the unknown. To carry a question gently is to acknowledge that the universe is always greater than your grasp. And in that humility, there is peace, and so you drift, lantern of mystery in hand, resting in the soft glow of the unanswered, waiting for the next chapter of the cosmos to reveal itself. What other visitors have been noticed and then allowed to fade into quiet? What truths are waiting in archives, in data tables, in corners of memory that have not yet been brought fully into light? The weight of secrecy is not only in what is hidden, but in what you imagine could be hidden. The mind fills silence with its own echoes, building possibilities, weaving wonder and suspicion alike. You cannot help it. Silence always invites stories, and yet even this has its beauty, because imagination itself is a gift. What you do not know inspires you to dream of what could be. What you cannot confirm encourages you to wonder. Secrecy, then, becomes paradoxical, heavy, but also fertile, restraining, but also inspiring. You let this paradox calm you. It reminds you that you do not need every answer to rest. You can carry questions gently, like seeds that may sprout later. You can honor the fact that some truths are not ready to be spoken, yet they still exist, waiting. The silence around 3i, Atlas, may feel deliberate, but that deliberation has not erased the objects. Passing, It remains in the sky's history, in the memory of those who tracked it, in the faint data it left behind. Secrecy cannot undo reality. It can only soften the way reality is shared. You breathe again, slower now, feeling how this weight settles. Not as burden, but as gravity. It grounds you, draws you inward, reminds you of the responsibility that comes with knowledge. To hold a truth is not simply to possess it, but to decide how and when it is revealed. That choice carries its own quiet power, and so you drift in the awareness that secrecy is not emptiness. It is presence, folded in silence. It is the echo of knowledge waiting to unfold. It is a veil drawn across the sky, not to erase the stars, but to filter their light until you are ready to see. You close your eyes and rest in this veil. You do not need to pull it back tonight. It is enough to know that behind it, truths remain, that nothing is lost, only waiting, that silence itself is part of the rhythm of discovery. Every object carries with it the memory of its birthplace. A stone on earth holds the imprint of the mountain it once broke from. A grain of sand holds the history of a coastline, shaped by tides and time. And in the same way, every fragment in space carries a trace of the world it once called home. 2. Think of 3i. Atlas is to think not only of its passage here, but of the distant shores it once left behind. It is a messenger, though not one with words. Its message is written in dust, in ice, in chemistry shaped by light from a star you will never see. You let your thoughts soften into that realization. This visitor is not empty. It carries with it the ancient whispers of another system, the traces of a sun rising and setting on worlds beyond your reach. Its atoms were forged under different skies, in furnaces not your own. Its shape was carved by forces foreign to the solar system, you know. The galaxies teem with suns, each with their own retinue of planets, their own belts of dust and ice. Most will never cross your path, but sometimes, by gravity's nudge or by cosmic accident, a fragment is flung outward beyond its parent star's reach, into the slow drift of interstellar night. 31ATLAS was one such fragment, carrying with it the geology of alien shores. You breathe into this thought, allowing it to settle gently. When you look at a pebble on Earth, you see more than stone. You see rain that eroded it, rivers that carried it, heat that cracked it, winds that smoothed it. The pebble is a record of its environment. So too with 3IATLAS. It is not just ice and rock. It is a record of conditions elsewhere, a frozen diary of a world you cannot visit. Perhaps it formed at the edge of a distant planetary system, where cold was eternal and sunlight faint. Perhaps it was shaped near a giant planet, nudged into new paths by massive gravity. Perhaps it was once part of a larger body that fractured, scattering fragments into the interstellar dark. Each possibility feels like a door opening into landscapes you will never walk, skies you will never breathe. You imagine alien sands, not literal beaches, but the granular remains of worlds broken apart. Each grain unique, each one carrying chemistry unfamiliar, yet built from the same universal elements: carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, iron. The building blocks are shared, but the recipes vary. The shorelines of other systems may be strange and beautiful, their rocks tinted by minerals you do not know, their skies painted by suns of different colors. 3I Atlas carried some trace of these places. Even in its fragility, even in its scattering, it whispered of alien shores. The light reflected from its surface carried the faintest fingerprints of its makeup, and though you could not see the place it came from, you held in your instruments the echo of its chemistry. There is wonder in this kind of indirect knowing. You may never touch those shores, but you can hold a trace of them in thought. The visitor becomes a bridge, connecting your sky to skies beyond. Your breath slows as you linger in that bridge. You realize how small the act of noticing seems, and yet how immense it truly is. A faint trace of light across a telescope lens becomes a map to another world's remains. A whisper of brightness becomes a story older than Earth itself. This is the gift of interstellar objects. They expand your sense of belonging. You are not confined to one system, one family of planets. You are touched, however lightly, by fragments from elsewhere. The galaxy is not separate islands, but a web of exchange. Dust and rock travel between stars, carrying whispers of alien landscapes. You hold this thought as though holding a grain of sand in your palm. Small, almost weightless, yet within it is a story vast beyond measure. The same is true of 3I, ATLAS. It was only a fragment, fragile, breaking apart as it passed near your sun, yet it carried the memory of worlds. So distant you cannot even name their stars. You feel the tenderness of that thought. Something so small, so fragile, yet so ancient, touched your awareness. You did not need to capture it. It was enough to notice it, to let its light cross into your instruments, to let its memory rest in your mind. And as you rest now, you realize that even your own body is part of this same pattern. The atoms in you were forged in distant stars. You, too, are a collection of alien sands, gathered into form for a brief time. You are living proof that the galaxy is one great system of exchange. So when you think of alien shores, you are not thinking only of distant worlds. You are thinking also of yourself. You are the meeting point of countless origins, the place where the dust of many stars has come together. 3-1, a TLAS, is not foreign in that sense. It is kin. It is another reminder of the shared matter that binds the cosmos. You soften into this kinship. It brings comfort. The visitor is not an intruder, but a relative long unseen. It does not threaten. It reminds you that the universe is not lonely, that every shore connects in some way to another, even across light years of emptiness, perhaps. This is why its presence feels like a whisper, not loud, not commanding, but intimate, like the soft call of something familiar. The alien shore is not hostile. It is simply other, and in its otherness it expands your sense of what is possible. You close your eyes and picture sands you will never touch, beaches of carbon ice, ridges of iron crystals, plains dusted in minerals unknown to Earth. These images are not facts, but reflections of possibility. They soothe you, because they remind you that the universe is richer than you can hold, yet open enough to invite your wonder. 3I Atlas brought a fragment of that richness into your night sky. Its dust scattered, its light flickered, but its presence endured as a reminder. You are part of something vast, threaded with countless shores, countless suns, countless worlds. Unseen. Memory has the texture of dust. It drifts, it scatters, it glows briefly in light before settling into silence. Some particles are carried forward, glimmering in awareness. Others fall away, lost, though never truly gone. When you think of 3I Atlas, now you do not see it whole. You see its fragments, the brief records written in numbers, the sudden shifts in brightness, the faint arc of its trajectory traced across the solar system. Its body has dissolved, but its memory remains, fragile as a comet's tail stretched thin across the night. Every visitor leaves behind such a trace. Comets shed their dust, meteors streak the sky, and even planets mark time in subtle gravitational shifts. But interstellar objects carry something more: the weight of the unfamiliar, the story of elsewhere. Their trails are not only physical, but emotional. They stir you to imagine places beyond, and that imagining itself becomes part of memory. You pause on this thought. Memory and tail are the same shape. Both extend outward, fading into distance, luminous at first, but dimmer with time. Both are delicate, easily lost, yet persistent enough to remind you that something once passed here. The trail of 3I, Atlas, is faint now. Its fragments drift outward, unseen. The dust it shed has joined the endless river of particles flowing through space, mingling with other streams, indistinguishable. Yet in your awareness, the trail glows. Astronomers turn their antennas toward the sky, hoping for signals. They listen across wide bands of radio light, searching for any hum, any whisper, any vibration that might suggest life or machinery. And yet 3I, Atlas, spoke nothing. It carried no radio call, no engineered tone. It offered no evidence of being built, no sign of deliberate transmission. Its silence was complete, unbroken. But silence itself can be a kind of language. It is the sound of neutrality, the presence of nature, unshaped by design. It is the voice of something older than your species, older than your sun, drifting through with no interest in being heard. This silence is not rejection. It is simply the way of the cosmos. You slow your breath as you reflect on this. Not every truth arrives in words. Not every presence reveals itself through sound. Sometimes the most powerful messages arrive as absence. The silence of 3IATLAS is one such message, a reminder that the universe need not explain itself to be real. Think of the comet tails, When ordinary comets graze the sun, they roar in their own way, not with sound, but with light, their gases heating, vapor trailing outward, glowing in sunlight. Their voices are plumes of dust. Their language is reflected brightness. Yet 3I, Atlas, was strange even in this. It glimmered irregularly, sometimes brightening, sometimes fading. Its silence broken only by these flickers of reflected light. You wonder about this quietness. Was it breaking apart, or was it holding something in reserve? Was it silence and emptiness, or was it filled with stories you simply could not decode? Silence leaves room for imagination. It invites you to listen more deeply, to lean closer, to ask questions without expecting answers. In the silence of 3I Atlas, you begin to hear echoes of yourself. Your own body carries silences to the spaces between heartbeats, the stillness between breaths, the quiet when thought dissolves into nothing. Just as the visitor moved without words, you too have moments where silence says more than sound. Science recognizes this silence as data. No signal means no engine, no artificial transmission. No radio hum means nothing technological stowed within its body. This absence rules out possibilities, narrows the range of explanations. But even as equations describe what is not, the imagination lingers on what might remain unseen. Silence is not always absence of meaning. It can be fullness beyond interpretation. It can be a library in which the books are closed, yet their weight still speaks. 3-1 ATLAS carried silence like this, a dense, immeasurable kind, the sort that lingers in the mind long after the object itself has passed beyond sight. You reflect on how silence functions on Earth. In conversation, a pause can carry more weight than a word. In music, silence defines the rhythm, gives shape to the notes. In art, empty space directs the eye as much as color and form. Perhaps the universe is not different. Perhaps silence is the art of stars, the rhythm of orbits, the pause that lets meaning rise. Astronomers who studied 3IATLAS did not stop at silence. They measured its motion, its brightness, its faint changes in speed. They did not despair when no signal was found. Instead, they leaned into the quiet, using it as a boundary against which to define the possible. Silence guided them, just as darkness guides your eyes to see starlight more clearly. And still, you linger with this visitor. You imagine drifting beside it, surrounded by the void. There is no wind, no rustle, no song, only stillness, vast and uninterrupted. Yet within that stillness lies an intimacy, a closeness with the object that words would only disturb. This is what listening to silence means, not forcing sound into the void, but receiving the void as it is. It is surrendering to the fact that some truths travel wordless. It is recognizing that silence is not a lack of communication, but a different mode of it. The universe speaks this way more often than not. Stars, planets, comets, all exist. Without words, they shine, they drift, they orbit. Their silence is their testimony. You let yourself soften into this thought. Your body begins to mirror the visitor's stillness. Your breath becomes the slow arc of its path. Your heartbeat becomes the faint pulse of its reflected light. And around it all, silence enfolds you, gentle, endless, unbroken. Silence is fragile, yet it is also eternal. It can be shattered in a moment by sound, but it always returns. The universe holds more silence than noise, and in that silence you find rest. You realize that the silence of 3IATLAS is not lonely, it is communal, shared by the countless other objects drifting unseen between the stars. Each one carries its own stillness, its own absence of words. Together, they weave a chorus of quiet, a cosmic lullaby too vast for ears but perfect for the heart. And so, you listen. You listen not for what is said, but for what is unsaid. You listen to the quiet hum of existence, the background of being itself. You listen to silence, and in it, you find connection. Knowledge is never a fixed shore. It is a tide that drifts in and out, revealing pieces of the seabed, hiding others beneath the waves. You find yourself standing in that in-between space, where the tide has drawn back just enough to show something new, yet not enough to explain it fully. This is where science most often lives, between the known and the unknown, with 3IATLAS. That space becomes even clearer. It is not easily labeled, not willing to rest inside a tidy category. It carries with it fragments of comet-like behavior, shedding dust, glimmering in light. Yet its orbit whispers that it is not from here. Its path is sharper, swifter, more distant than anything native to the solar system. You feel it resisting the nets of classification, slipping through the words designed to hold it still. Science is the art of naming, of fitting shapes into patterns. But every so often, something arrives that will not be contained. It hovers. In that fragile middle ground, where certainty dissolves and imagination is called upon to step forward. 3IATLAS rests in this middle ground. Neither comet nor asteroid, neither familiar nor fully alien. It lives in the quiet pause between categories. You breathe into this thought. Your own life, too, carries moments like this. Times when you are not what you were, and not yet what you will be. Moments of transformation, of uncertainty, where definitions fall away. You understand, then, that science and self both dwell in thresholds. To live at the edge of the known is to live at the frontier of becoming. Astronomers catalogue what they can. They record its brightness, its velocity, its shifting fragments of dust. They compare these with the comets they have known, the asteroids they have tracked. The data lines up only partially. Pieces fit, others fall away. The result is not a solid answer, but a mosaic with gaps left open. In those gaps, mystery breathes. You feel the pull of certainty, the human desire to place things in boxes. But you also feel the relief of letting that desire soften, of allowing space to remain undefined. The unknown is not an enemy. It is a companion that reminds you the universe is still larger than your grasp. 3-1 ATLAS becomes a mirror of this truth, a visitor that cannot be pinned down, and therefore calls forth humility. When astronomers debate, they use words carefully. They ask, is it cometary? They ask, is it asteroidal? But even these questions fracture under the weight of its motion. Labels strain, categories blur, language begins to fray at the edges. You realize that science, for all its precision, is also a kind of poetry. It works with metaphors, with approximations, with the delicate art of describing what is not fully seen. And so, the story of 3I ATLAS becomes one of liminality. It is an object in passage, not only through space, but through meaning. It teaches that knowledge itself is often provisional, a bridge built only as you walk across it. You cannot see the whole path in advance. You cannot predict exactly where it will lead. You move forward anyway, step by step, question by question. This is how discovery feels, not like reaching a final conclusion, but like opening a door that leads to many more. Every answer unfolds into new questions. Every certainty dissolves into deeper layers of uncertainty. It is not failure. It is the rhythm of learning. The cosmos seems to prefer this rhythm, never fully resolved, always leaving you just enough clarity to go on, just enough mystery to remain awake with wonder. 3I/Atlas reminds you that categories are tools, not prisons. They help guide thought, but they are not the truth itself. The truth is broader, more fluid, more resistant to capture. Like water, it slips through the nets of language. Like starlight, it travels across impossible distances, carrying only fragments of meaning. The visitor carries this lesson silently, drifting beyond the sun's embrace, refusing to be reduced to a single name. You reflect on how often in history the same has occurred. Objects once thought to be wandering stars became known as planets. Lights once seen as portents became catalogued as comets. Voices of static in telescopes turned into signals of distant galaxies. At every stage, categories shifted, reshaped themselves, learned to bend. The unknown pressed against the known, and the known made room. Perhaps 3I/ATLAS is part of this tradition. Perhaps it is here to remind you that science is not a finished book, but a living manuscript. Its pages are still being written, its margins still open for notes. There are moments in the night sky that pass almost without recognition. A subtle shimmer, a faint trail, a flicker in the stillness that most eyes will never see. And yet, those whispers carry entire stories, stories of origin, of journeys, spanning millions of years, of truths that unfold beyond the reach of ordinary thought. You breathe slowly, feeling the rhythm of your own chest mirror the rhythm of the cosmos. The stars above do not pulse for you, and yet you find yourself sinking with their quiet permanence. Each breath is a small reminder. You, too, are part of this vastness. Among the many lights that dot the darkness, some are familiar. The stars hold their places. The planets wander, but their paths are steady and predictable. Even the comets, with their long icy tails, return on cycles you can mark in calendars. They are recurring guests, expected, charted, explained. But once in a long while, the universe breaks that pattern. Something comes not from within the solar system, but from far beyond. A traveler that does not return, a guest that does not belong to the family of planets or the circle of comets. Its orbit is not a loop, but a line, a passage that will never bend back to you again. This is the quiet presence you feel tonight, the whisper of something foreign in the dark. You let your mind soften into the idea of distance. It is easy to think of space as empty, a void so barren that nothing can cross it. But in truth, it is not empty at all. It is filled with dust, fragments, and remnants of worlds broken apart. It is a slow river of matter flowing between stars, a scattering of seeds that drift endlessly. Most of these seeds will never come near you. Their paths are spread across light years of emptiness, lost in silence. But a rare few wander close enough to be seen, their momentum carrying them across the thin circle of your solar system, before they continue on outward again. These are the interstellar visitors. You have met so few of them, and yet each one feels like a revelation. They are reminders that your neighborhood in space is not isolated, that the universe is connected, that stars exchange fragments the way trees scatter pollen in the wind. The first of these travelers you knew was called Oumuamua, discovered in 2017. Its very name meant scout, a messenger from afar. Its trajectory was sharp, unbound, proving it came from outside the solar system. It was a slender fragment of something larger, maybe rock, maybe something stranger. It passed quickly, silently, and left behind more questions than answers. And then, only 2 years later, another whisper in the sky, another signal from beyond. This was 3IATL-AS, the third interstellar object ever confirmed, and the one that carried with it an even deeper quiet, a deeper mystery. You imagine it as a fragment of a faraway world, perhaps a sliver broken from a planet long ago, or the icy remainder of a distant comet's collapse. It traveled for millions of years, untouched by any star, drifting through the dark between suns. And then, with no warning, it entered the sphere of your own. It is difficult to hold this thought fully. You are used to thinking of the sky as something that repeats. The constellations, the orbits, the familiar rhythm of sunrise and sunset. But here is something that does not repeat. Something that comes once and then is gone forever. A once in a lifetime breath of the cosmos, here and then vanished. The astronomers who spotted it used their instruments not as eyes, but as ears. They listened in the language of numbers, measuring brightness, speed, and motion. And in those numbers, they heard the same whisper you feel now. This object does not belong. You wonder what it means for something not to belong in a universe where everything is made of the same dust. Every atom in your body is older than the earth itself, born in stars that burned long before the sun was born. So, in a way, all things belong. And yet, motion matters. Orbits matter. Pathways carve identities. This whisper in the sky was not shaped by the same family of orbits that shaped your own world. It is a traveler from a different lineage, a reminder that your solar system is not the only story unfolding. You let your body relax into the rhythm of this thought. The idea itself feels like a lullaby, that while you drift into sleep, countless other worlds drift through the dark, unseen, unmeasured, but real. You do not need to chase them. They come, occasionally, to brush past you. Think of it like the rare leaf carried across oceans by currents, landing on a shore far from where it grew. The leaf does not stay. It does not plant roots, but its presence tells you something about distant forests you will never see. 3IATLAS is such a leaf, a fragile message from a forest of stars beyond your horizon, a signal that you are part of, something far larger than your eyes can hold. You may never know its true origin. Perhaps it came from a planetary system long since gone. Perhaps it was flung outward by the collapse of a sun, or by the gravity of unseen giants orbiting another star. It carries within it the history of that place, written not in words but in minerals, in ice, in the very structure of its atoms. And now, for this brief moment, it crosses paths with you. What makes this thought so soothing is its inevitability. For millions of years, it traveled here. Every drift, every curve of gravity, every silent pull of motion, all of it was leading. To this crossing, you could not stop it, nor could you hasten it. It was always meant to pass by you in this way. At this time, there is comfort in knowing that some events are not bound by choice, not fragile to human effort. They simply unfold, like the rising of tides or the drift of seasons. You are here, to witness, to breathe, to rest in the knowledge of vastness. As you drift deeper into stillness, you feel the edges of your awareness soften. Your body becomes heavy, like a planet held in gravity. Your thoughts become light, like dust caught in a beam of starlight. And above all, there is that whisper in the sky, faint, fleeting, almost gone. It is easy to miss. Most people do. But tonight, you let it linger in your mind. You hold it gently, knowing that to notice it is to step beyond the familiar. You do not need to solve it. You do not need to name it or measure it. You only need to recognize its presence. A fleeting reminder that the universe speaks in whispers, not shouts. The visitor fades, continuing its silent journey outward, beyond the reach of your world. It leaves no sound, no mark, only the faint awareness that something has passed through, and in that awareness you find rest. You let your breath slow further. The whisper of the object blends with the whisper of your own body. Inhale, exhale. A rhythm as old as stars. A rhythm that carries you inward, even as the object carries itself outward, and as sleep draws nearer. You feel a quiet question settle at the edge of your thoughts. How many other whispers have passed by, unseen, unheard, unrecognized? There are stones that never belong to a single star. They do not circle the warmth of a sun, nor linger in the gravity of a planet. They drift instead through the spaces in between, crossing gulfs so wide that even light takes centuries to travel. These are the interstellar stones, fragments of worlds unmade, fragments of stories untold. You think of them as wanderers, not broken, not lost, but released, ejected by the tug of a giant planet, or flung outward by the collapse of a star. Each one becomes a traveler, carrying within it the memory of where it was born, but never turning back. Your mind softens into the image of these stones as seeds. Stars are like trees, growing, shedding, scattering, and the universe is there. Forest, wide beyond imagining. Each stone drifts as though it were pollen caught on a cosmic breeze, moving from one branch to another, sometimes carried far, sometimes lost in open air. Most will wander forever unseen. The spaces between stars are vast, and the chances of crossing your narrow field of vision are rare. But a few, every so often, find their way into the circle of your sun. And when they do, they give you a glimpse of what lies beyond the familiar. You let your breath fall into rhythm with this thought. Inhale, and you feel the heaviness of rock, ancient and unyielding. Exhale, and you imagine the release of that rock cast away into the void. Each breath mirrors the drift of stone. Wait, then letting go. Some stones are small, no larger than dust. They slip unnoticed through your atmosphere, vanishing in a streak of light. Others are massive mountains, adrift, cold and silent. Their gravity bends the path of smaller companions as they pass. All are silent, and all are older than memory. You think of the places they come from. A world shattering in collision. A comet flung loose by the pull of unseen planets. A disk of material around a young star, scattered before it could coalesce into something whole. Each fragment carries the fingerprint of its home, a mixture of ice, metal, and mineral, frozen stories written in their composition. The truth is that your own world could have created such wanderers. In the early years of the solar system, planets formed through collisions, mergers, and violence. Countless fragments were flung outward, never to return. Some may now be drifting through distant star systems, whispers of Earth's beginnings. Carried far from home, the stones drifting toward you now are other planets' whispers. Their paths stretch back through time older than the human species. They have passed through the emptiness between stars, through clouds of gas, through the faint wash of galactic light. Each one has been shaped by a journey you will never fully trace, and yet, for a moment, they cross near enough to be seen. Their speed betrays them. Bound objects move in loops, predictable and patient. These visitors move too swiftly, too sharply angled, their paths revealing their interstellar origin. That is how you know they are guests from beyond. You think of Almamua, the first that was noticed. A thin shard, moving faster than any comet. Its brightness flickering strangely as though it was shaped unlike anything you had seen. It left behind no clear answers, only wonder. Then Borisov came, a more familiar body, glowing with the tail of a comet. And then others suspected, perhaps more faint, perhaps too fragile to be tracked for long. Each one a seed, a leaf, a message from a forest you cannot see. The thought calms you. You realize that space is not a cage. It is porous, open, connected. Material flows from one star to another, carried by gravity, scattered by momentum. Even in the vastness, there is exchange. Your system is not an island, but a shoreline touched by distant tides. You sink deeper into the rhythm of this idea. The stones do not rush. They drift with inevitability, with patience. Their journeys unfold over millions of years, longer than any history you know. You cannot hurry them, you cannot delay them. They arrive when they arrive, and then they are gone. What does it mean to hold such a moment? To catch a glimpse of something that has wandered for eons, only to vanish again. Perhaps it means that your life, brief as it is, touches eternity in flashes. Perhaps it means that wonder itself is the true gift these stones carry. You breathe again, slower now. The thought of stones between suns becomes a kind of lullaby. Each one a bead on a thread too long to follow. Each one a reminder that even silence carries history. And you let your mind soften further, dissolving into the idea that the sky above you is not fixed. It is a moving ocean, and you are afloat upon it. Some currents bring familiar stars, steady and known. Others carry driftwood, from shores you cannot see. You rest in this duality, the familiar and the foreign, the bound and the free. The earth itself is a rock circling one star, but beyond, countless others drift untethered, moving always outward. You are connected to them, not through sight, but through the quiet recognition that you share the same cosmic story. And as you rest, you wonder softly, almost as a whisper within your own mind. If so many stones drift unseen between suns, how many have already brushed past, unrecognized? How many secrets have passed silently, leaving no trace but the possibility of wonder? There are moments when the sky reveals itself not with brightness, but with absence. Not with something large or obvious, but with something so faint that only careful eyes, watching patiently, can sense its passage. In the spring of 2019, one such absence was noticed. It appeared not as a blaze of light, but as a subtle motion, a trace that did not belong among the familiar stars. The telescope that caught it was part of a survey, a wide-field eye searching the heavens for comets, asteroids, and small, icy wanderers. It was designed not to marvel, but to measure. And in those measurements, it captured a shadow moving too quickly, too sharply, to be ordinary. This guest was given a name, 3I, ATLAS. The 3 marked it as the third interstellar visitor. Ever confirmed, the I stood for interstellar, a reminder that it was not born in the family of your Sun, and Atlas was the name of the survey telescope that first traced its faint line against the night. You let the weight of that sink in. A number, a letter, and a word. So simple, and yet within those markings is a history stretching across uncountable years and distances. The name is a human attempt to hold something that cannot be contained. It is easy to think of naming as understanding, but naming does not tell you what something is. It only creates a place for it in your thoughts, a box where you can keep your questions. And so, 3I, Atlas became a guest you could point to, even if you could not yet know it fully. The astronomers measured its brightness. They charted its orbit. They noted that its path cut through the solar system in a way no bound object ever could. It was moving too fast, its trajectory too steep, its momentum too great to ever circle back. This was not a comet returning on a centuries-long loop. This was a one-way passage. Its discovery came quietly. Unlike dramatic comets with their glowing tails, 3I, ATLAS, did not blaze in the sky for ordinary eyes. Its presence was delicate, a faint signal in the noise of the universe. You might not have noticed it had you been watching with your own eyes, even on the darkest night. It was only through careful observation, through sensitive instruments, that its shadow was drawn into recognition. And yet, faint as it was, its meaning was enormous. Because to spot such a visitor is to be reminded that the boundaries of your solar system are not closed. They are open, permeable, touched by threads that stretch across the galaxy. Every so often, something crosses those threads and drifts into view. You soften into the thought that this was not an accident. Not in the sense of purpose or intention, but in the deeper sense of inevitability. For millions of years, 3IATLAS had been traveling. Its path was determined by encounters long before your Earth ever formed. And in the year 2019, it happened to cross the reach of your instruments, leaving behind a brief trace in your records. You may think of it as a guest who arrives at a house unannounced, walking quietly across the porch before disappearing down the road again. The visit is brief, almost unnoticed, but it lingers in memory because it does not fit the pattern of daily life. This guest was hidden not because it wished to be, but because of the vastness it traveled. The space between suns is so immense that objects within it are faint beyond imagining. To notice one at all is an act of patience, of persistence, of quiet listening. The astronomers who found it could not keep it in their sight for long. It was fragile, breaking apart as it neared the warmth of the sun. Its brightness fluctuated, scattering into fragments that soon became too faint to track. Its story was not one of permanence, but of passing. And yet, in those fleeting observations, a truth was confirmed. This was not of your system. This was not a child of your sun. This was a wanderer from beyond, moving with a kind of urgency that only distance could explain. You breathe slowly with this thought. The universe is filled with such wanderers, countless beyond number. Most will never be noticed. But this one, for a brief season in 2019, crossed paths with you. It was not a circle, nor even a long oval. It was a line that cut across the solar system and kept going. This is how you knew it was not from here, because only a body born in the deep galaxy, moving with ancient momentum, could arrive at such a speed and on such a path. Its velocity was greater than escape. It was not caught by the sun. It was simply passing through. You pause on the thought of speed. Most comets wander at tens of kilometers per second. Fast by human standards, but slow enough to be captured by the sun's long embrace. 3-1, Atlas moved faster, its pace too sharp, its line too steep. It was like a skipping stone that could not be held by water, bouncing onward with no return. The numbers revealed this. They revealed that this visitor came from outside your system and would not remain. But the numbers also whispered uncertainty, because no matter how carefully measured, its brightness flickered, its fragments shifted, its path trembled slightly under the forces of its own breaking. The equations wavered, just enough to remind you that certainty is always partial. This is not failure. This is the beauty of science, that it shows you where certainty ends and wonder begins. The refusal of numbers to settle is not a flaw, but an invitation. An invitation to hold the space where knowledge meets mystery. You let that thought ease over you. So often, life teaches you to prize certainty. You measure, you predict, you want to know what comes next. But the cosmos reminds you that uncertainty is natural, that even with the most precise instruments, some truths remain slippery, ungraspable, and that in those moments you are called not to control, but to marvel. The thrill of this moment in 2019 was not in possessing answers, but in knowing that something larger was passing through. Numbers told part of the story, but their refusal to settle made it richer. They left space for awe. Consider how much of science has been built on such unsettled numbers. The orbit of Mercury refused to match predictions until Einstein revealed the bending of spacetime. The light of galaxies refused to fit expectations until Hubble revealed the expansion of the universe. The motion of stars around invisible centers refused to balance until dark matter was suggested. Every refusal, every misfit number, carried within it the seed of a deeper truth. So too with 3i-ATLAS. Its numbers unsettled you, not because they were wrong, but because they were pointing outward, beyond the borders of your solar system, beyond the reach of your usual cycles. The mathematics whispered, "This is not from here." And in that whisper, you felt something rare. The thrill of being reminded that you are not alone in your corner of space. That fragments of other worlds drift close enough for you to glimpse. You breathe into that thrill now, letting it soften you instead of stir you, because thrill does not always need to be excitement. It can be quiet, like a shiver of recognition. It can be calm, like the stillness after a bell rings. It can be the deep comfort of knowing you are part of something wider. The astronomers continued to calculate, even as the comet fragmented. They plotted possibilities, reconstructed orbits, estimated where it might have come from. But its trail backward pointed only to the vast wash of the galaxy, to no single star. The past was blurred. The future was clear only in its outward motion. Numbers gave you boundaries, but not completion, and in that incompleteness, there was space for reflection. You realize that numbers are like constellations, shapes you draw across a wider sky to help you navigate. They do not hold the whole truth, but they give you direction. 3-1-ATLA has reminded you that direction is sometimes enough. It is enough to know that the visitor was not bound. It is enough to know that it carried the fingerprint of another place. It is enough to have seen it at all. You settle into that thought. The refusal of numbers to settle is not chaos. It is simply a reminder that the universe is larger than the equations you write. It is a reminder that there is always more to notice, more to imagine, more to wonder about. Your body relaxes further as you consider the nature of trajectories. Everything moves. Planets circle, moons loop, comets stretch into long ellipses. But some paths are not loops. Some paths are one-way journeys, cutting across your sky like silent messages. 3i Atlas followed such a path. It was a straight thread, pulled across the weave of your solar system, a reminder that the fabric extends beyond your sight. You hold this image like a lullaby, feeling the comfort of knowing that not all journeys need to return. Some are beautiful simply because they pass. The refusal of numbers to settle becomes, in this way, a gentle comfort. It tells you that you do not need to solve everything to feel part of the cosmos. You only need to notice the patterns, to listen. When they whisper, to rest in the space between certainty and mystery. And as your breath slows, you feel the quiet thrill return. Not the thrill of answers, but the thrill of being watched. Not literally, but cosmically. The sense that the universe notices you as you notice it. That there is a mutual awareness in this brief crossing. It is not a gaze of eyes, but a meeting of paths. Your life, short and fragile, intersecting with a fragment that has traveled for millions of years. The numbers trace it, the equations map it, but the meaning goes deeper than numbers. It is the simple wonder of contact. You let that wonder carry you, soft and slow, deeper into rest. The guest has passed, the numbers remain, and their refusal to settle becomes part of your dreaming. They echo the truth that the cosmos is not a solved puzzle, but an open sky. Memory has its own orbit. It circles back, again and again, bringing vivid fragments of what once was. Sometimes these fragments grow faint with time, and sometimes they sharpen, glowing brighter in reflection than they ever did in the moment itself. You remember the first interstellar visitor that was seen. It was 2017, and the world was surprised by a shape that had never crossed the solar system before. Oumuamua, its name, drawn from the Hawaiian language, meant scout or messenger, as though it had come ahead of others, pointing toward possibilities still unseen. It was only visible for a brief while, too fast to linger, too faint to hold for long, but in that short span, it left behind more questions than answers. Its path showed immediately that it was not from here. Like 3I, Atlas after it, Oumuamua moved on an unbound trajectory, too swift to be caught by the sun. It had come from the deep dark between stars, and it would return to it. But it was its nature, not just its path, that unsettled you. The numbers did not fit comfortably. Its brightness fluctuated, suggesting a shape unlike the rounded bodies you expect. Some said it was long and thin, shaped like a spindle or perhaps a shard. Others argued it was flat, like a pancake, wide and thin, tumbling as it went. The truth remained out of reach, because it was already too far, too dim, by the time the debate grew. No clear tail was seen, no bright exhalation like those of comets. Yet its motion suggested that something more than gravity was pushing it. Some subtle outgassing perhaps, too faint to leave a visible trail, but enough to nudge its path. Or perhaps something else, something not yet explained. You breathe slowly as you recall this, noticing how memory itself mirrors the comet's brightness. It flickers, it shifts, it leaves room for interpretation, and within that room, wonder grows. Oumuamua unsettled science, not because it refused observation, but because it reminded you that not all visitors can be neatly categorized. It slipped between the definitions, not a comet, not an asteroid, not a familiar type of fragment. It was a body from elsewhere, carrying with it the unfamiliar patterns of a different origin. This is the heart of memory, the way uncertainty endures longer than certainty. The answers you find today may be revised tomorrow, but the questions that remain, they linger like echoes. Oumuamua became such an echo, and when 3I Atlas was found only 2 years later, that echo stirred again. Another guest, another whisper, another reminder that the universe is full of stories that arrive without conclusion. You rest in this realization. Mysteries are never finished. The universe is not a book with pages you can turn until the last one is reached. It is an ocean without shorelines, and every wave brings something new. You may name it, measure it, attempt to define it, but still it will recede, leaving questions behind like shells in the sand. Oumuamua and 3I Atlas are linked in this way. Two bodies from beyond, two fragments of other places, passing through your sky in quick succession. Not twins, not even cousins, but travelers bound by distance. Connected by the fact that they crossed paths with you at all. You wonder softly, if there is meaning in the timing. Billions of years stretch across the history of the galaxy, and yet here, in the brief span of your life, two interstellar visitors revealed themselves. It is coincidence, perhaps, but coincidence itself is enough to inspire awe. It is as though the universe was reminding you, gently, that you are not alone. The silence of Oumuamua lingers. It sent no signal, no sound, no deliberate message. Its silence was complete. And yet, that very silence became the message. It is humbling to realize how much can remain unseen. How many visitors have passed silently, unmeasured, unrecognized? The sky above seems permanent and unchanging, yet it is full of motion. Every faint shadow, every fleeting guest carries with it the story of another place, another time. 3. Atlas is gone now. Its fragments dissolved, its path carried it away from your sun, outward again into interstellar night. But its memory remains, stored in numbers, in equations, in faint images, captured on sensitive cameras. And in those memories lies the wonder that cannot be reduced to data. Because what lingers is not the numbers, but the question. What is it? What was it before it drifted here? Was it part of a planet? A fragment of a comet? A survivor of a star's collapse? You will not know for certain, but the not knowing itself is part of the gift. It is the open door that lets your mind wander, just as the object wandered. It is the reminder that science is not only about answers, but about the beauty of questions. As you rest in this thought, you feel yourself drawn into a rhythm of curiosity and calm. You realize that wonder is not the opposite of rest. It is a kind of rest itself. To wonder is to release the demand for certainty, and to drift instead with the quiet current of possibility. 3. Atlas reminds you of this, that the universe will always be larger than your capacity to know it, and that this largeness is not a threat, but a lullaby. You do not need to measure everything to feel at peace. You only need to notice the whispers that cross your sky, and allow them to soften you into stillness, so you let yourself drift deeper. The image of that faint guest dissolving into your mind like a stone sinking into water. You feel the quiet urgency of its passage mirrored in your own breath, steady, fleeting, alive. And you rest in the thought that the hidden guest of 2019 was not hidden at all. It was there, waiting to be noticed, waiting to remind you of the vastness that surrounds you. Comets are among the most delicate voices in the solar system. They are icy archives, holding within them the oldest material left over from the time when the planets were still forming. You think of them as frozen breaths, waiting for a touch of warmth to awaken them. As a comet falls toward the sun, it begins to change its frozen surface, so stable in the cold of deep space, cannot remain solid in the rising heat. Gases escape. Dust lifts away. A faint mist grows into a long, luminous tail. This is why comets are said to breathe. They exhale as they approach the fire, and their exhalations stretch for millions of kilometers. The pattern is familiar. You learn to expect it. Each comet, whether bright or faint, follows this same rhythm of slumber and awakening. They are icy wanderers, but their lives are written in cycles. They return, they breathe, they fade again into the dark. But then, once in a rare while, a body arrives that does not fit the pattern. A body that seems to belong to this family of breath and light, yet moves in a way that no comet of your sun ever could. This was the case with the visitor called 3I Atlas. When it was first seen, its appearance echoed that of a comet. It displayed the soft haze of gas and dust, a fragile coma that surrounded its icy heart. It developed a tail, faint but visible, streaming behind as it fell inward. At first glance, it could be mistaken for just another in the long line of solar comets. And yet, its orbit betrayed its strangeness. Whereas solar comets loop back on paths that always return, this one cut through the system like a stone skipping. Across water, it was not circling, it was passing through. Its velocity was greater than any comet that belongs to the Sun's family. Its path was not curved enough to return. It was, by every measure, unbound. This is what made it both familiar and strange. It breathed like a comet. It exhaled, it shed, it gleamed with the glow of sublimating ice. But its breath came from another place, another history, another star. You let your mind soften into this paradox. Something that feels known, yet is foreign. Something that behaves like the bodies you recognize, but originates in a story far beyond your own. It is like hearing a melody you almost remember, but not quite. The rhythm is right, the tone is right, but the song itself is unfamiliar. The more astronomers watched, the more unusual details they found. Its brightness fluctuated, changing in ways not always expected. It fragmented, breaking into smaller pieces, scattering its body into a cloud. This fragility is not rare among comets. Many of them collapse under the heat and the stress of approach. But in this case, the collapse seemed more dramatic, as though the object was more delicate than the comets you know. And still, despite these similarities, the simple fact of its orbit kept whispering, "This is not one of yours. This is a stranger. You." Pause on that thought. Strangers often carry with them a sense of both wonder and unease. You do not know their histories. You cannot predict their actions with certainty. And yet, they remind you that the world is wider than your own small circle. 3. Atlas was such a stranger. It reminded you that even the most familiar phenomena, the breathing of comets, can take on new meanings when seen in a different context. The universe is vast, and its patterns extend beyond your local sky. You reflect on the nature of comets themselves. They are fragile, short-lived displays compared to the stars, and yet they may be the very carriers of life's raw materials. Some scientists believe that comets may have delivered water and organic compounds to Earth in its early history, seeding the ground for life to grow. If that is true, then comets are not only wanderers, but givers. They are messengers of possibility, scattering the ingredients of life wherever they pass. What, then, might an interstellar comet carry? What stories lie frozen within ice that formed under another star's light? What molecules, what ancient fragments of chemistry were hidden in 3I Atlas as it drifted across the galaxy? The questions cannot be answered fully, but their asking brings a kind of quiet awe. You rest in that awe. You realize that science often lives in the balance between what is known and what is suggested. You see patterns that hint at truth, and you let your imagination, grounded in fact, fill in the spaces. This balance is not unsettling, it is soothing, because it tells you that the universe is always more than you can hold, yet always open to being wondered about. The fragments of 3I Atlas now continue on their way. Some scattered inward, some outward, their paths no longer clear. The comet-like body itself did not survive long near the sun, but that is part of its nature. It came to breathe, and in breathing, it unraveled. Its story, like the trail of dust it left behind, became part of the wider sky. You drift further into this thought, that fragility itself can be a kind of beauty. The most lasting impression is not always made by permanence. Sometimes it is made by the fleeting, by the fragile, by the visitor that lingers only for a moment before dissolving. Comets teach you this. And 3I Atlas, stranger though it was, echoed the same lesson. It came, it breathed, it scattered, it was gone. And yet its memory endures, shimmering like a half-remembered dream you cannot fully grasp but cannot forget. Your breath slows. You feel the kinship between your body and these cosmic wanderers. You too breathe in cycles. You too are shaped by fragility and change. And like them, your briefness is not a flaw but a feature of being alive in time. You let that awareness settle gently into you, like dust settling back onto stone. The visitor may have been a stranger, but in its breathing and breaking, it revealed something familiar. It mirrored your own existence, fleeting, fragile, and yet full of meaning, and so you rest in that reflection. The stranger among comets was not here to frighten you, but to remind you that all things, even the foreign, even the fleeting, belong in the great rhythm of the universe. Numbers are usually steady companions. They bring order to the shifting motions of the sky. They give shape to orbits, predict returns, and hold together the vast ballet of planets, moons, and comets. For centuries, you have relied on them as anchors, as guides that translate chaos into rhythm. But sometimes, numbers do not settle. Sometimes they resist the tidy patterns you expect, refusing to be arranged into familiar cycles. Sometimes they point instead to something larger, stranger, unbound. When astronomers first traced the path of 3I Atlas, they expected the same outcome they always do, that the data would resolve into a curve, into an ellipse, into an orbit that tied the object to the sun. That is what nearly all small bodies do. They circle, even if their circles are stretched and uneven. They loop back, obedient to the pull of gravity, like dancers bound to a center. But the equations for this visitor refuse to loop. The curve would not close. Instead of forming an ellipse, the trajectory stretched outward into infinity, into infinity.